and welcome to the History B Schools History Project exam walkthrough for Living Under Nazi Rule. The aim of today's session is to gain an understanding of the structure of the exam paper for Living Under Nazi Rule 1933 to 1945. As students, you can work through the materials independently, or your teacher might guide you through them. Within the session, you will review OCR's Year 11 practice paper. You can find a copy of the assessment material by clicking on the hyperlink, which directs you to OCR's website, or you can work from a paper copy. The session looks at the full range of questions and considers the command words and common question themes. You might attempt to have a go at writing some answers of your own. You can try to mark those from the mark scheme guidance, or your teacher might mark them for you. Included in the session, you will also find some exemplar answers. You can compare those with your responses. This session should equip you with some top tips to take forward to your own assessments or exams. If you or your teacher only want to attempt the questions from the Year 11 practice paper, you should refer to just slides 9, 18 and 27. Before we even look at any questions, it's really important to know what the exam paper looks like. In any assessment or examination, take time to read the instructions carefully. For the Living Under Nazi Rule section of the exam paper, you will be instructed to use black ink. This is so the examiners can read your answers clearly. Also take some time to read the question instructions closely. For the Living Under Nazi Rules section, make sure that you answer questions 6 and 7, and then choose from either question 8 or 9. Make sure you take some time to read questions 8 and 9 carefully before you make your choice. You will write all of your answers in an answer booklet provided. You can answer the exam questions in any order you like, but make sure that you put the numbers in the margin for the examiner's reference. The total number of marks for each question will be shown in brackets. The quality of extended responses will be assessed for questions 8 and 9 in this section of the exam paper. Question 6 will always start with the same question stem. What can source A tell us about? Source A could be a visual or written source. Take some time to study it closely. You will also be given some contextual information or source provenance that accompanies the source. You should also use that to develop your response. You should aim to make inferences from both the content and contextual information that accompanies the source within your answer. You will probably write a paragraph and should support your inferences with details from the source. To develop your response, consider using phrases like Source A tells us, Source A is useful because, Source A is useful because it was produced by. This question is worth 7 marks. Before you attempt question 6 from the Year 11 practice paper, let's discuss the question that was asked in the 2018 series. The question asked, what can source A tell us about Hitler and the Nazi Party in January 1933? Use the source and your own knowledge to support your answer. You can either read the source independently or listen to it being read aloud to you. Source A, an extract from Hitler's speech entitled Appeal to the German People, broadcast on the radio on the 31st of January 1933. Millions of Germans listened to the speech. It is an appalling inheritance which we are taking over. 14 years of communism have undermined Germany. The task before us is the most difficult which has ever faced Germany. But we believe in our nation and in its values. Farmers, workers and the middle class must unite to build the new Reich. The national government will restore to the German people unity of mind and will. It will rise above position and class to bring our people again to an awareness of racial and political unity. It will make national discipline govern our life. Within 4 years, the German farmer must be free from impoverishment. Within 4 years, unemployment must be overcome permanently. In foreign policy, the national government will see regaining the freedom of our people as its highest mission. Germany will be a state of equal worth and with equal rights. Now, German people, give us 4 years and then judge us and give your verdict. Let us make a start. We have no desire to fight for ourselves, only for Germany. Read or replay the source for a second time. This time, make a list of things the source tells us about Hitler and the Nazi Party in January 1933. Once you have completed that exercise, some suggested inferences will be revealed on screen. Now reread the provenance. Make a note of what that tells us about Hitler and the Nazi Party in January 1933. When you have completed that exercise, some suggested inferences will be revealed on screen. Let's look at a suggested answer to the question that was asked in the 2018 series. You can read the examiner's commentary on the paper by clicking on the hyperlink, which will take you directly to the examiner's report. Question 6. The source tells us how Hitler becoming Chancellor was seen as an important national event, as the speech was listened to by millions of people. It explains how hostile the Nazis were towards the communists. For example, Hitler says that 14 years of communism have undermined Germany, which tells us that the Nazis were anti-communist. The fact that this source was a broadcast tells us about how the Nazis were keen to drum up genuine popularity through using speeches like this for the March election, as well as using violence. Hitler had been made Chancellor, but still faced a wide range of opposition in January 1933. For example, the Nazis did not have a majority in the Reichstag, so it was very important to rally support. This is a top-level response. It is now time for you to attempt a question 6 independently. Write your answer to the question that was asked in the Year 11 practice paper. Spend approximately 10 minutes reading the source and writing your response. The question is on screen, or you might find it helpful to work from the source on paper. Your teacher will tell you when your time is up. Your response will be marked in accordance with the mark scheme on screen. Your teacher will tell you how your work is going to be assessed. They might choose to mark your work for you or ask you to reach a judgment on which of the levels on screen you think you have achieved. Let's take a moment to reflect. Your teacher might give you a top tips for success handout. Refer to the section labelled question 6. You might find it helpful to make a note of some of the key messages we have discussed that will help you succeed in this section of the exam. Question 7 will usually start with the question stem, how useful are? You will be given a selection of sources and or interpretations to analyse. You will also be given some contextual information or source provenance that you should use to develop your response. You should aim to make inferences from the content and contextual information that accompanies the sources. There will typically be 3. You can deal with each one individually or handle them as a set. Ensure you relate your comments on utility to the specific issue in the question. This question is worth 15 marks. Before you attempt question 7 from the Year 11 practice paper, let's discuss the question that was asked in the 2018 series. The question asked, how useful are sources B and C and interpretation D for a historian studying total war in Germany between 1943 and 1945? In your answer, refer to the 2 sources and the interpretation as well as your own knowledge. Before we review the evidence, let's ensure we understand the question. What is total war? Have a think about what that meant for Germany in 1943. You might want to make some notes or perhaps discuss this with your teacher. Now let's discuss the evidence provided. As you did for question 6, consider the uses of both the content of the evidence and the contextual informational provenance that accompanies the evidence. You will probably find it most helpful to work from a paper copy of the evidence. Take some time to read it through or listen to the evidence being read aloud and annotate your thoughts. Remember, you are looking for uses linked to the issue of total war. Source B. From a report of a speech made by Goebbels in Berlin, February 1943. The report was produced by the Propaganda Ministry. Capitulation means giving up. The English say that the German people are resisting the government's total war measures. They say the German people do not want total war, but capitulation. Shouts from the crowd, never, never, never. I ask you, do you believe with the Führer and with us in the final victory of the German people? I ask you, are you determined to follow the Führer through thick and thin in the struggle for victory and to put up with even the heaviest personal burdens? I ask you, do you want total war? Do you want it, if necessary, more total and more radical than we can imagine it today? The crowd stood up and there are shouts of Führer, command, we follow. Source C, a British propaganda leaflet produced in 1943. The leaflet tried to justify the bombing of German cities to the British public. Interpretation D, from the preface of a book by historian Gotz Ali, Hitler's Beneficiaries, Plunder, Racial War and the Nazi Welfare State, published in 2008. I was born in 1947 and still have memories of post-war Germany. People often talked about how they were better off during the war. We were well off during the war, they complained. My mother told me that my aunt got a package every few days from her husband, who was serving in the army, which contained everything she could possibly want. It was only when I began to work on this book that the truth behind these stories became clear to me. Hitler was able to maintain morale by sharing out the spoils of Germany's military victories, the profits made from forced labour, confiscated property of murdered Jews, and the deliberate starvation of millions of people. Germans, bombed out by Allied air raids, were resupplied with furniture taken from Jews who had been deported and murdered. As I was writing this book, I found I could no longer take pleasure in several beautiful pieces of antique furniture in my home. All these benefits made Germans open to Nazi propaganda and led them to support the Third Reich. Ensure you have taken time to consider the utility of each piece of evidence for a historian studying total war. Once you have completed that exercise, some suggested inferences can be revealed on screen. Let's look at an extract from an answer to the question that was asked in the 2018 series. You can read the examiner's commentary on the paper by clicking on the hyperlink on screen that will take you to the full examiner's report. Question 7. Source B is really useful for showing us that there was popular support for total war in Germany. When Goebbels suggests that the English think the Germans just want to give up, the crowd reply, never, never. Source B is also very useful for showing us that the Nazi Party were under pressure due to the war in the East going badly at this time and needed to convince the audience to support them. The purpose of Goebbels' speech was to earn the support of the audience, and the fact that the propaganda ministry published the report shows how the Nazis were attempting to create widespread support for total war. Remember, this is just an extract from a full answer. Each piece of evidence should be assessed for question 7. It's now time for you to attempt a question 7 independently. Write your answer to the question that was asked in the Year 11 practice paper. You should spend approximately 15 minutes reading the evidence and writing your response. The evidence will appear on screen, but you will probably find it most helpful to work from a paper copy. Your teacher will tell you when your time is up. Your response will be marked in accordance with the mark scheme on screen. Your teacher will tell you how your work is going to be assessed. They might choose to mark it for you or ask you to reach a judgment on which of the levels on screen you think you have achieved. Now let's complete our top tips for success handout. Complete the section labelled question 7. Make a note of some of the key messages we have discussed that will help you succeed in this section of the exam. You will always have a choice between question 8 or 9. You will typically be required to consider two sides of an argument. You should try to reach a judgment to conclude your response. Your answer should try to give 4 supported examples that consider both sides of the argument in question. You might choose to write a short paragraph about each of the examples. Ensure the examples that you provide are specific to the factors or issues in the question. Consider dates, events and policies that will show your examples in the context of the question. Try to use the words from the question to start each of your points. This will ensure your answer has a clear focus. This question is worth 18 marks. Before you attempt either question 8 or 9 from the Year 11 practice paper, let's discuss the options from the 2019 paper. Question 8 asked, the lives of all workers improved as a result of Nazi policies between 1933 and 1939. How far do you agree with this view? Question 9 asked, the German people supported the war between 1939 and 1945. How far do you agree with this view? Always give yourself a minute to choose your question carefully. Take that minute now. Would you choose question 8 or question 9? Regardless of question choice, you should always take a few minutes to plan your answer to either question 8 or 9. You might find it helpful to sketch out a planning grid and make a note of the examples that agree and disagree with the issue in question. Your teacher might give you the opportunity to do that now for the response that you have chosen to consider. Let's read an extract from an answer to question 8. If you planned a response to this question, you might want to compare the points raised in this extract with the notes you made. Question 8. On the one hand, the lives of all workers improved as a result of Nazi policies. The Beauty of Labour scheme encouraged employers and business owners to improve working conditions. Furthermore, through the KDF, workers' lives improved as they had the incentive of holidays to work towards. Both of these methods meant workers were happier and more willing to work. On the other hand, from 1939, many workers contributed to the war effort and their lives worsened as work became more difficult. Working hours were long, and although salaries generally increased, measures like rationing were introduced, which meant many workers became miserable. This made their time both in and out of work less enjoyable. Let's read an extract from an answer to question 9. If you planned a response to this question, you might want to compare the points raised in this extract with the notes you made. Question 9. Some may agree with the statement because women were able to get their jobs back due to the increase of men joining the army and more labouring positions becoming available. Before the war, women were expected to be perfect stay-at-home wives and mothers who had many children. Many women completely disagreed with this and wanted their jobs and independence back. Women were grateful of the opportunity to return to work and therefore would have supported the idea of war because of the freedom it gave them. It is now time for you to attempt question 8 or 9 independently. Write your answer to one of the questions that were asked in the Year 11 practice paper. Spend approximately 25 minutes writing your response. The questions are on screen. Your teacher will tell you when your time is up. If you attempted question 8, you might find it helpful to complete a short self-assessment exercise. On screen are some examples that agree and disagree with the statement. Reread your response and compare the points you've raised with those on screen. If you attempted question 9, you might find it helpful to complete a short self-assessment exercise. On screen, you will see some examples that agree and disagree with the statement in question. Reread your response and compare the points that you have raised with those on screen. Responses to question 8 and 9 will be marked in accordance with the mark scheme as shown on screen. Your teacher will tell you how your work is going to be assessed. They might choose to mark it for you, or they might ask you to reach a judgment on which of the levels on screen you think your response has achieved. It is now time for you to complete your top tips for success handout. Complete the section labelled question 8/9. Make a note of some of the key messages we have discussed that will help you succeed in this section of the exam paper.